regular meeting of the Architectural Board of Review, Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Mike, you have a roll call for us?
Yes. Member Kerouac.
Here.
Member Callahan. Member Callahan.
Hold on here. Here.
Member Dittmer.
Here.
Member Waymeyer.
Here.
Chair Hunter. You're here, obviously. Member Deegan and Member Dahlman are absent. So we have a quorum of 5 members.
I can't hear you now, Mike.
Oh. How about now? Now can you hear me? Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Now we're working okay?
Yeah, so far.
Okay.
Okay, so we did the roll call. How about the meeting of minutes for the January 5th meeting? Anybody have any comments, corrections?
No comments.
Okay, hearing no other comments or nothing really. About a second. I mean, a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Michael?
Okay. Member Waymeyer.
Aye.
Member Callahan.
Aye.
Member Kerouac.
Aye.
Member Dittmer.
Aye.
And Chair Hunter.
All right.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay. At this time, we reserve time for people that might want to contribute something that's not on the agenda. I'm assuming there's nobody that's there, Michael. Is that correct?
Nobody here in person. We have one person in the audience virtually. She is not raising her hand to speak. So I guess we give her just a second. If anyone wants to speak on an item not on the agenda, you can, click the virtual raise your hand thing, or anytime you want to speak later in the evening. And no one is indicating that they do, so I think no one is wishing to speak at this point.
Okay, well then let's move on. This is a discussion regarding possible CBD streetscape improvements and alterations. And Drew, you want to kick this off? Is that?
Sure, happy to do it. All right, well, good evening, everybody. Good to be back with the ABR. It's been a long time.
This is not exactly the way we like to do it either.
I'm sorry?
So this is not the way we like to do it either.
Oh, what, you mean virtually?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you meant me being present, then I'd understand both answers.
No,
So,
always glad to have you.
okay. Tonight, I'm hoping to accomplish 6 things. The first is to walk through with the village engineer, Jeff Hansen, to review some public parking concepts, to go back and just do a quick look-see overview of the approved Central Business District Streetscape concept plan, and seek some general direction from you all regarding the use of decorative paver accents within the sidewalk streetscape program in the CBD, and also review some previously discussed by the ABR treatments to the southeast corner of East Scranton and Center, that landscape bed corner there right in front of Innovasi, and where the dancer garden club bed is, landscaping bed. And then also take a quick look at the downtown visual preference study back of 2015 with some wordles that were generated as part of that. Just kind of look, are these still relevant? Do these still make sense and consistent with everybody's mindset where we are, some 6 years later? And then also answer some quick questions that a planner that the village has hired from Tesca, Jody Marinaro, who has helped the village throughout the years. And again, let me say, all of this is to kind of set the context for a conversation that's going to happen a month from now. But I wanted to kind of set the table for everybody and review these large plans and talk about some concepts. And really, you don't have to decide anything tonight at all, unless there's something that's clearly a consensus about some of these streetscape improvements that we'll talk about. But this is really just having an opportunity to share information with you all, for you to give us feedback. The village is in the process of planning some streetscape work, like the memorandum in the packet talks about. We had planned on doing resurfacing of the block between Walnut and Oak and replacing most of the curb line. And as part of that, our good engineers came up with an idea and said, hey, you know what? If we're doing this, you may be able to pick up more parking stalls. And so that kicked off a conversation at the board level, which led to several different parking concepts that we're going to review with you. And I guess to further give you some context, so back in 2014, the village hired Rich and Associates parking consultants to do a parking study for the village. That largely took place in the fall of that year. And the overall analysis of the village at that time was that we did not have a parking deficiency. And that was based on the users, the tenants of the central business district of that time. And that really hasn't changed a whole lot. And that there's been some movement, but largely I would say we are still in a parking surplus situation, but not a lot. I'm talking, maybe 35, 40 stalls in that neighborhood of a parking surplus. But I think you would agree that if you, most of you are downtown users, you would agree with what the study's findings was. While there may be an overall surplus, they're probably not in the most convenient locations, right? They're on the perimeter, the train station. And so for that purpose is with there's opportunities to grab new parking very economically, that's worth talking about and considering. And the village board talked about this when considering, or do we want to do some changes to our parking and also some of the streetscape. Again, I'll get to that again with some of these downtown accents, but the idea of should we do it now, should we not? It's difficult because some of these things, there's trade-offs with each of these. You'll see that. Each of them have warts. Each of them have, they're also nice in that they do add stalls, but none of them are perfect. That's kind of the backdrop. I would say one more piece is that, so we're going to do this resurfacing of that main block of East Scranton. We're also going to be reworking the curbs, which means we're going to probably end up looking at changing the streetscape pattern, but also taking advantage of this opportunity to do some additional accents. One of the things the village board talked about, and I showed that in the packet, is these overhead lights that I affectionately call twinkle lights. We've seen them in a lot of central business districts now. They add a charm and ambiance that a lot of people like. And the village board was very interested in exploring that with you all, the ABR, and getting your feedback on that, and then maybe, pursuing a design of that. And I would say they're pretty keen on that concept, whether the village does any changes to the downtown parking or not, just the addition of these additional lights. So, Jeff, is there any questions or thoughts or comments about any of these parking or anything I've discussed so far?
I think the most important piece to begin with is this whole notion of one-way Scranton between
Walnut and Oak.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because that's what started this thing, is at least from our conversation of a couple of weeks ago.
That's right. Yeah, and we've talked about that, and there's been more drilling down on that in terms of getting feedback from public safety officials and working with our engineers and getting some more data about what that could look like and what would that drive aisle look like. But also, we've talked to some other, I would say, planners, and I think the first rule of thumb would be, it's not always a great idea to take away a two-way street if you have one. To make it one way generally is from a planner's perspective, is viewed as a negative. You're taking, another set of eyes off the street in one direction. You're reducing, ease of access and so forth. That's not to say there aren't examples of one-way streets that are, very bustling and hustling shopping centers that exist. And of course, Lake Bluff's downtown is not, it's not your something you'd find in a textbook, right? It's a small downtown, very low traffic volumes. So it's not typical from a textbook standpoint. So anyway, but yeah, why don't we start with those and go through with them. Again, these are concepts. Some of these were mentioned in the Rich and Associates parking study. Some of these have come up over time in different analyses. So Jeff, if you could you share your screen? I think everybody knows their village engineer, Jeff Hansen.
I will share my screen if Mike would let me, please.
Oh, I didn't realize that your panelist promotion didn't automatically give you those powers. Let's see here. Where are you? Oh, here you are. I made you a co-host and a second promotion. Now for sure you have the powers.
All right. Drew had mentioned the parking study. I just was going to start here. This is a few years old, but this shows the different areas of downtown and what they had as surplus or deficits in parking. The area here, they call Block 4 and Block 7 in the study, have probably gotten a little worse as buildings have converted their use to more restaurants, which has a higher parking demand. This minus 21 at 3 is kind of misleading because there's all the extra parking across the street, the way they split the block. And you see that they had a significant surplus in the train station lot at that time. So we looked at all the areas of the downtown and potential to add more parking. The most obvious and easiest is the open space at the train station. You see when you come in now, there's 3 rows of cars, a one-way aisle, and you turn around and come back. You could extend the 3 different aisles, further to the north and have an additional section of maybe even just, parking like this. Essentially, you could add 100 stalls if you wanted to in that area. It's just getting further and further from the downtown. But that is a place where we could add parking. This spot here in the middle of the screen is the Walnut Lot is here. We looked at, you could potentially cut off Walnut Avenue. There's several large trees in this open village-owned land on the east side of Walnut. You could expand that parking lot and pick up about 30 stalls if you wanted to take those trees out and kind of wrap it around the Walnut House, which is also village-owned. We come down, look at Scranton. Now, Scranton is wider in what we call downtown Block 1 here west of Walnut. You could just restripe it and try to get angled parking both ways and add about 6 stalls just by restriping and kind of moving the center line over a little bit. We touched briefly already on, let me zoom in a little bit, on this block here.
Jeff, I think I lost you, your audio. Did everybody else lose his audio?
I lost it.
Yeah. Jeff, are you still there?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I leaned on the audio controller on my desk and turned it to 0. I apologize. So where was I when I cut off, Drew?
Just starting
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this block here that we're talking about resurfacing, or we are going to resurface, to do this, you'd have to move the curb line about 2.5 feet to the north, which is essentially where those faux bricks are right now. Those aren't full bricks, the ones that keep popping out. But if you move the curb back to where the edge of those bricks are now, you'd have a wide enough street to do something like this. That would pick up 9 more stalls in this block.
Jeff, before you move on from that, just again, I am not a planner by trade, and Jody will be here a month from now to talk about this. But one of the things, and you guys may know this as architects and designers, is obviously converting from a parallel parking layout to a diagonal or angled parking is for a user of a sidewalk, I would say more aggressive, right? The idea that it's more auto-centric and you have, just as opposed to feeling more protected where a car is like a barrier between you and the street activity, the cars are coming at you. It's just a feel, and that's what I've been taught and read. But so that's just one of the, when you start looking at these types of changes, is that there's pros and cons with these. It's great to pick up parking stalls, right, and parking inventory. At the same time, it's a different feel for the user. Likewise, you're shrinking the sidewalk on the north, not by a lot, and you can still maintain. What's the width, Jeff? You can get to about 15.
There's at least 10 feet there. There's a couple of trees on the east end. There's a couple of the buildings. I forget it was the medical building there, Drew, where the front kind of comes out a little bit on the sidewalk, and they've got a little the North Shore.
Spinal, yeah.
They have a little bit of landscaping in front of their building, which shrinks the sidewalk a little bit. You also do, when you angle park, you overhang the curb a little bit, so the cars do intrude beyond, the curb line, which they don't do in a parallel parking situation.
And the other rub with this too is by moving the curb line, you're going to impact all the trees on the north.
Yes.
I guess my biggest concern, which is mentioned to you when we talked earlier, Drew, was that if this dimension is correct, you've got a clear dimension between driving space of 13 and a half feet. And I think that most of the engineering would recommend 16 to 20 feet as an aisle space. And I'm concerned that a fire engine can't get there and put down their feet, that the delivery truck is going to block the entire space when they're making deliveries, and they seem to do that a lot more than if you start to pay attention to it than you would think they do. I think the rest of the issues can probably be dealt with. I'm a little concerned about the lights on the north side. Mm-hmm. If they become even if they don't have to be moved, they're going to become sort of targets by cars that are pulling up all the way to the curb. Anyway, I'm just concerned about the logistics of it first before we start talking about what it looks like.
All great points. And Jeff, why don't you start addressing those based off the conversation? Since we spoke, Bob, there's been some reviews of those issues.
Yeah, we looked at this. We are showing this as a 16-foot aisle. We haven't actually widened the street from the previous one. We showed a 13.5-foot aisle. The stall depth here, there's 15.5 feet. I think the original drawing we showed 17.3 feet of stall depth, and that is the stall depth you need if you have like a brick wall at the end, not a curb that you can overhang. So we did have the ability to show stalls that meet an IDOT standard and a 16-foot aisle, which is what the fire department had requested, to be able to get the feet on the ladder truck out and have that clear space. So that dimension did work. I said we did just redraw the lines a little bit, but they do meet the standards set by the state.
Okay.
The light poles, I was planning on moving the light poles, and they're so old they'd probably just get replaced with something similar. I don't want, the light pole, 6 inches beyond the curb again for overhangs, and I don't want to have to try to, draw the lines funny to account for light poles. I think it's just as easy to move them. We have to do some electrical rewiring of them anyway. So I don't know if they would move because of their age, but I was planning on moving them back. There's a fire hydrant here that needs to be moved as well in this scenario. The other thing I would point out is we have this curb coming out, especially on this corner here and this corner here, just to create more sidewalk to lessen the crosswalk width. And I would point out that even if we do not want to do a one-way street, want to leave it as is, we could still neck this down a little bit, lessen the crosswalk, and make more public space on these corners. We don't need it to be that wide to get trucks through.
Okay.
I have a concern. Can I speak about the concern now about this?
Please.
So I hang out at Scranton Alley a lot when the weather permits and COVID permits, and you'll see just groups of middle schoolers just flying down Scranton from east to west, like in the middle of the street, like 8 or 10 kids on bikes. And, they don't use the sidewalks. They're right in the middle of the street. And my fear is, you make this a one-way street. When you diagonal park like this, you're not really looking, you're looking behind you, you're never looking kind of the oncoming because there's no oncoming. And our backup cameras work, we depend on our backup cameras a lot, and it doesn't show any of that condition, of kids coming down that street. There's just hordes of kids, and it's wonderful to see them, but it's a heavily trafficked bicycle route for middle schoolers and younger. And
I'm just wondering if those kids pay attention to one-way streets.
well, I'm sure they don't pay attention to anything. I mean, they just fly. I just see these kids, and luckily it's two-way street, so it's not as dangerous, but they are pretty much just in their own little world when they're biking through.
Yeah.
Just going to put that out there as a concern.
Noted. Yeah.
Can I ask a question too? What do you have as far as handicap spots and the widths required for those? I know right in front of Innovasi, there's typically, I think right now we definitely have a few, and it doesn't look like any of these spots are designated as handicap. Are there certain spots that are required that's going to actually make so we have less spots because of the requirements? And then also, it looks like on the south side here of Scranton, there's no breaks in the parking at all. I know there's at least a couple spots that are striped out where maybe there wasn't enough room for a full parking spot, but it gave it so there was a spot where you could have access to walk and you didn't have to try to cut in between cars. And it doesn't look like there's anything like that accounted for here either. So are either one of those planned, or is it just not showing in this particular plan?
As far as an accessible stall, I believe we have to put one back. There is one, I think it's just one here right now. This is a drawing based on, a blurry aerial, so we haven't kind of gotten down to the exact dimensions yet. I would expect that we would leave some kind of space mid-block like there is now. And that aisle actually can double as an accessible aisle if it's not a van. Accessible stall has to be 8 feet wide. Non-van, I think it's 4 or 5. So if we did make a little crosswalk area in the middle, we would think about that. I'm not in love with this little crosswalk because it doesn't go all the way across the street right now. So I feel like it dumps people out into what drivers do not see as a crosswalk, and that we should either have a full crosswalk or none. Because, like I said, we're kind of telling people to walk out here, but as soon as they get to the end of the stripes, the drivers don't know that that's a crosswalk. So that is something that we would get into more in a final design, but we would definitely have to meet ADA requirements and decide if we need to put a mid-block crossing. You notice we're not showing, there's a stall right here. That could either be left as a parallel stall, or we could put a full crosswalk in this spot.
I think from just a visual, and well, more than visual, it would be that whatever the material becomes on the sidewalk, it goes all the way across the street. I think you're right, Jeff. It becomes a formal crosswalk, and it's going to affect those parking spots somewhat. I think, though, that you have to have more than one handicap spot there. My recollection from years ago, it was 2%. It's a very high number. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but
yeah, I mean 2% of 50 is 1, right?
I don't know.
Bob was told there would be no math tonight.
I don't do math anymore.
I mean, when we get into it, we will make sure that we're meeting the law. I mean, that kind of is something that we design.
Any other thoughts about that mid-block crossing?
That's spooky.
Mike, you're gonna have to kill your mic again. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So, Jeff, why don't you keep going along, please?
Yeah, we also looked at oak and any way to increase parking there. We resurfaced these 8 stalls a few years ago. We thought about going further, but there are 3 nice oak trees and some pines here, so we could add a couple more stalls at the end here. It's just a matter we have to take out some fairly decent trees. There is space across the street. You know, there's a bank there now, has 3 driveways with the drive-through and another one and I think another one that's kind of stopping us from having any ability to put parking stalls on that side of the street. We know that's not a bank anymore. We don't know what it's going to be, but there is a wide enough right-of-way to put a few more stalls on the east side of the street if it wasn't all driveway. So the future might allow us to add some stalls here. The other thing we looked at is down here, there is a driveway to the church, has a little brick. I can find it better here.
It's an outdoor space. It serves as a driveway with a parking pad. And right now, the church is allowing Bluffingtons to use it to, provide more outdoor dining.
When they do use it for parking, it wouldn't be, I mean, this is their private property, so it would take an agreement, but you could certainly come in here and then park in these, pull in from the common driveway, eliminate this bump out, and you could have 2 more parking stalls here, which would also make our public works people very happy not to have to plow around these 2 little bump outs. So those are all the spots in downtown that we've identified as potential for expanding the parking, and we're just, I guess, trying to get your input on what you think.
So
Yeah,
if you
go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, if you go back to block 1, just start at that end and say you could do diagonal parking there's enough room in that street?
It has the width for 2-way aisle and diagonal parking on both sides. It's tighter than it is now if you did that, obviously, but it could.
And you can't expand that down in front of the bank itself?
There's like a loading stall here. When you get down to here, this has always been X'd off for parking.
It's been X'd off,
I see
right.
trucks there quite often unloading. You could maybe, if you want to take that away, you could maybe get 1 or 2 here, but I do like having this a little wider here so right turners can get out while people left turners are waiting.
Yeah, that is a designated loading zone for that block. There's another one, if you go up to Walnut, there's another loading zone just past,
Right.
yeah, the Walnut house there along the east side of Walnut Avenue. And Bob, to your point, you're right about, if you move to the block of Scranton between Walnut and Oak, Jeff, that block, you made a comment early on, Bob, about, having the ability, those restaurants today getting served by trucks, occasionally stopping, in the eastbound lane. And
No.
And so that's something that you can cure by, setting regulating hours when that can, or designating you just can't do it there, and, show them where they can do it and give them a different place to go.
So, I mean, I'm just going to keep talking. If somebody else wants to jump in, feel free. But I have I think the closing up Walnut would turn out to be a bad deal for North Avenue. North Avenue is already a bad deal. And it just would make it worse. You got, I mean, we pick up a lot of parking, but it's really not where people want to be. Yeah, last time we did the little parking lot that is there, they're different neighbors now, but they were pretty upset about that whole deal.
Yeah, and I had heard, Bob, and I haven't looked back and reviewed the minutes of that land transaction in the village, going back and building that back in 2006. But I was told that somebody, or I don't know if it was the village leadership at the time, had told the neighborhood that they would not do what's shown here. For what it's worth, I don't know. Again, how
I don't remember that. I know that's why we built the wall and covered it with ivy down there, and that's been pretty successful.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we in all of these, we got to make sure that the trade-off for a couple of cars doesn't eliminate, Tree City here.
But that's right. Like I said, they all have warts, right? One way, whether it's eliminating trees or changing, impacting other users or, impacting overall flow. So do you want to keep going around the clock there? We're now at midnight. Do you want to go to 1 o'clock on the dial there? Go to that Walnut to Oak section with the one-way, Jeff?
Yeah, if there was any easy way to get more parking, we would have done it already. So
Yeah,
they're left
well,
with
everybody's
some
been looking at parking since
flawed
I've been,
objects.
so.
Yeah. Well, and listen, I mean, Jeff and the consulting engineers that came up with this concept, it's now is the time to do it. When you look at the Walnut, like what the village spent on land and construction, I mean, that was it $35,000 a stall. This is, pennies on the dollar comparatively. This is.
What was the village board reaction to the one-way street business?
They were open to the concept, but they obviously, like everybody else, this is our Mona Lisa, and we don't want to, paint a mustache on it, or change it. We don't want to make it worse than it is. We want to make it better. But it's like Jeff said, none of these are perfect. There's trade-offs, and put them on the scale, and where do we think we can do okay? I mean, I think the one way is not ideal. Like I said, a planner would tell you probably shouldn't do it. But again, there's other examples of where this works, like Bluff. I mean, we're never going to have a signal in our downtown. The traffic volumes are so low. To Matt's worry, yeah, I agree. Pedestrians and users, the kids are going to go where they want to go. And, is that they would have to be, retaught and directed otherwise. But it's, again, there's warts with all these.
So to look into the future, Ford is going to quit building cars, period. So trucks are now becoming, freight train length. And we got, I swear every fireman's got a truck that's longer than his buddy. And I mean, I'm just wondering how traffic is going to be and parking is going to be 5 years from now. As everybody's swinging towards electric now, we're going to have some electric charging posts in there. I mean, just things like that I think need to be thought of.
No, I mean,
this is obviously changing.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I'm going to go back to the train parking lot. There's nobody taking the train anymore compared to what there used to be.
That's right.
And I don't know that that's ever going to change. It'll certainly pick up some, but I don't think it's going to go back to, going to have a lot of empty office space downtown now.
Hard to know, right? I mean, to your point, Bob, it's how are users going to change? I mean, we had the interrupters of Uber and Lyft, and did that really had that had enough time in the market to shift how people drive and when they drive and more shared automobiles? And is that going to happen? And what's the period of time that we'll see that shift? I don't know. If I had that knowledge, I'd be investing for a living and not sitting here.
Somebody else jump in here. I'm concerned about Matt's comment too.
Yeah.
With the kids.
Yeah, I also think that configuration on Scranton, if to go one way, it's also going to change the character of that street. It's very, if you can imagine like all those stalls being filled, which is why we would do this, and then you're just kind of in cars and people are in and out. It just seems like we're creating new problems to solve one problem, which is not always the best solution. I think that's the most aggressive one in terms of, I know the other one on Walnut, I can see that being just stick in the eye to the North Avenue people. Mm-hmm. I would rather turn that into a nice green space if we're going to put time into that. But I would look at some of the less aggressive ones, even if you're cutting down a couple of trees, maybe that's a trade-off to get 3 spots versus doing this whole one way to get 9 spots.
Yeah, to your point, Matt, those right there on Oak, those right between PNC and the Harlan building.
Yeah.
So the board looked at those before, and when we were resurfacing that lot, they said, let's not do it yet. We have a parking surplus. Let's not step on the gas yet. The other friction point is, right, this is one-way southbound.
Right.
So you're also pushing users to go into the North Avenue neighborhood,
Yeah.
residential area, to come down here and park. That's another ward, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, North Avenue is, as far as I'm, it's like the worst street in town to try and get around,
Yeah.
especially in summer. You know, when you've got all the activities that are up at the park, plus the garden market and things like that, it's impossible.
Yeah. Again, there's no, I mean, this is, the goal tonight is not to decide what one you think is the right way to go. And it's, I mean, we wanted to introduce these to you, look at them, think about them. We can come back to them in the next, you know, a month from now. Something else is going to hit you. You say, hey, I thought about this some more, and there's no way in the world I'd ever recommend we do this, you know, or I think we should all go all in, or, you know, hey, given that the village is in our ledger's in a positive situation, let's wait and see, you know? So, you know, you wait and see, you know, so that's okay too.
Well, you know, I don't know if the time is going to come where we can actually sit down around a table with drawings and things, and this is very hard for me to you know, some of this stuff.
Well, and Bob, to that point, if you'd like, we can print out like 11 by 17 versions of all these if everybody wants to see them, and you know, get some.
No, I mean it's hard to have a dialogue this way. You know, it's better than nothing, but it's not what what we're all used to doing when we're talking about, you know, things that are not just written word.
Agreed.
Hey, Drew, do you have like you've mentioned several of the cons regarding the different layouts. Do you have like a sheet that kind of shows what those pros and cons are on these different layouts? Because it seems as though there'll probably be a lot of pushback from people in the community to push this to be a one-way street. I don't see this getting positive feedback from people for 10 parking stalls, because the people in the community, and it's just my opinion, I just don't see people saying that 10 parking stalls on Scranton is worth turning the traffic around. And I really like Matt's comment about the kids in the street, and you know, the kids in the street and the adults in the street and everybody, to retrain everybody. Is it worth it? I mean, you're not gaining, you know, you're not doubling the amount of parking available. It's just 10 stalls, and this is on the preliminary plan, so I'll have to see what happens, you know, in the final plan. And then it's just one other thing. It seems as though a lot of places where we have, you know, you have one-way traffic, there's another street that goes back that has one-way traffic. And we definitely don't have that in Lake Bluff either. So it's like you're just got this one-way thing happening, and it kind of seems out of place to do this one-way thing. So there's just a couple things.
That's exactly what we're looking for, feedback-wise, Julie. So thank you for that.
I know if you ever go down and try and drive around downtown, I think it's Des Plaines. Of course, they've got a lot of diagonal streets in there too, but good Lord, you go around the corner and you don't know where you are. It's all one way, or a lot of it's one way. It goes back and forth. To me, it's very tough to drive around down there. You don't want to make it so hard here. It's very simple right now. You know, everybody's got used to block one traffic going that way, but you know, someday that'll probably go away. Let's move on then.
Well, and Julie, so you know, we are developing that kind of a simple diagram showing, you know, pros and cons of a simple visual aid. We'll circulate that when it's done.
That'd be a good idea.
Yep. Chair Hunter, there is somebody with their hand raised. I don't know if you want to take comments now, or you want to.
Because I don't think we're done talking about the other things on your list here.
No, this is number 1 of 6. So.
Yeah. No, go right ahead.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Mickey Collins. And
hey, Mickey.
Hi. I've already expressed a few concerns to Drew, and I think you've raised some really good comments talking about the traffic. And one thing I would point out, being a resident to the east of the downtown, I always go west on Scranton. Everybody living in my area would be greeted by these big do not enter signs as they hit Scranton, and then we'd have to circle around. So that's a traffic concern, and sort of a kind of an unfriendly, I think, entrance to the downtown for us anyway. But let me point out just another concern that I haven't heard you touch on, and that is narrowing down the sidewalk on the north side of the street. Because hopefully, as our downtown grows and becomes even more vibrant, we might have a restaurant or two on the north side of the street as well. And they're going to want to put tables out on the sidewalk. I just think losing the sidewalk, taking it down to 10 feet, trying to get a tree zone in there, the walkable area is going to be quite squeezed, and it would not accommodate any cafe tables. And then Drew, I think, used the term that it would impact the trees. It probably would kill the trees or, require that they be replaced. And those are some, I've walked by them, and there are some nice trees there that would take decades to grow to that, the size that they currently are. So I just wanted to throw those thoughts out to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Mickey.
I think I said they would kill the trees. So
yeah, that's an impact, right?
No, well, that's yeah, as we talked about it would, and I'm afraid that even some of this other work that we're talking about, that we get to this next point, starting to talk about some of these other amenities, like do we add the metal grates and so forth, like we've done on Block 1, which is great in terms of increasing the usability of the sidewalk, but at the same time would more than likely kill the trees. It's like, it's a trade-off. You got to start over with the trees, but you give your place your tree a better home for the long term, but in the short term, you have to start over. So not ideal. So why don't we do this? Let's go, Jeff, if I can share.
What happened?
Jeff did not, or he let me share my screen. And I wanted to go back and review the original approved concept plan that this body many moons ago put together. So this has been shared somewhat recently when this area here was talked about. I believe the
right.
Bluff 125 came through and used this design concept as their inspiration to put in those brick pavers here. Just wanted to drill down really quick and talk about this. So this is the overall plan that the Design Collaborative and Jim Gamble worked with the village and the ABR to finally adopt a overall streetscape concept plan. It was installed as part of this Block 1 redevelopment. We've learned over the years that it did not live well or survive well in the elements, and the bluestone treatments have not served as well, and the landscape tree beds, cobblers did not, it was kind of a tripping hazard complaint, and also limited the amount of surface area of the sidewalk that was usable. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the village went in and put in the iron tree wells, which did cause us to have to start over with those trees, which they weren't that old, but still had to start over. But we think that's in a good place now. But as you move to this block, again, this is the block that the village is going to be doing work on this fall. And so the idea is, how do we treat the sidewalks, given this is the concept, and given that we know we don't want to do the new concept with regards to the bluestone or the cobble borders around the tree wells. So, Jeff, do you want to talk about what the two kind of treatment alternatives we were discussing? And I don't know if you have any visual aids for that.
Well, we talked about, the bricks along both sides of the street behind the curbs have to come out. They're just, they've aged out, and they're not usable anymore. And we talked about maybe just filling that back in with regular sidewalk concrete, replacing it with pavers, would keep the look that it has now. They are expensive, and they do need maintenance. So the one thought was we would just take it out and put concrete in like the rest of the sidewalk. And I guess, I'm not sure, I slips my mind what the other concept you're referring to is. The lights, is that what we're talking about?
Oh, it's one, yeah, so it's the removal of these brick pavers here.
Yeah, they've been in bad condition for years.
Yeah, I mean, they're essentially a tile, and it pops up because they're not a full depth. And Jeff, we talked about also, do we do something with the tree wells too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if we put the tree grates in like we did block 1, you see that tree on Drew's screen, to put the grate in, the grate is flush with the sidewalk, so the tree has to be about 4 inches lower. And removing the mulch around that far, the tree would likely kill the tree. So that's why you'd end up having to replace all the trees as well if we put tree grates in. But it would add more usable space on the sidewalk if people didn't want to put tables out or other amenities on the sidewalk. Putting tree grates around would give people more places to walk. We've also talked about bumping out the corner just a little bit to the left of the screen here. Could potentially put in bike racks, benches, other amenities by narrowing down this crosswalk a little bit and pushing that corner out.
What is the disposition of the post office? I mean, there's been talk off and on for years about it going away.
You know, I don't know. And, you know, now the building is privately owned. The post office is a tenant. You know, it's great to have in a central business district, right, as an activity center. But at the same time, it's, you know, is it here forever? I doubt it. But I really don't know. So one more other element is, you know, you can see how these have kind of buckled, these bricks. I mean, these have not lived well either. Again, Jody will come in and talk to you about this. I think most planners will tell you that you don't want to spend your money on these types of treatments anymore. But I think if you asked our public works superintendent, he would love it to be concrete, right? That is easy to maintain. It lives well, it lasts well, it matches the other materials there. You don't have different types of materials moving at different speeds and weathering differently. Jeff, if we put concrete in here where the bricks are today and didn't touch the tree wells, would that damage the trees? I'm guessing not, but I don't know.
It shouldn't damage them. I mean, you know, it is construction. You are digging somewhere, but it would be much less impactful than anything else we're talking about.
Yeah. And it would be to both sides, yes?
Yes, that brick has to go on both sides.
One of the things that hasn't worn well is, you know, the very special aggregate that we used in front of block 1 and the concrete. That has, you know, it just hasn't stood up. And then when you go to patch it, which was done, you can't match it. But if you go out to Target by their front door and along the big entry plaza, what they've done is pretty interesting. And it's just done with saw cuts. And they make a pattern with saw cuts in a couple of places. They've dyed the concrete. And, you know, rather than just have a plain old concrete, it might be that you can still do it and just have a nice sand finished concrete. But you make patterns with saw cuts. And I don't mean saw cuts with big fiber boards between them. Just thin saw cuts. And they may have a tendency to spall in some places, but.
Bob, I'll show that, Bob. I just wanted to show, this is the area where I think the first time that North Shore Gas came in and they came in there and they finished this aggregate. It kind of looks like a pool decking, the way they created the exposed aggregate, not similar to the way we did the wash for the rest of this block, right? It was difficult. It was very difficult to explain and reproduce. But let me do a quick flyover.
But the corner turns, you know, the sidewalk out there looks like kind of a mess now.
Yeah.
Between the bluestone and the concrete that hasn't, it's been, you know, well, first of all, it's a lot of cracks in it too.
Yeah, it looks like there was some settlement at the building line where they overdug, and it is pretty
Yeah.
much cracked longitudinally all the way.
And I tell you
from
what,
the
you
building.
can't put any concrete anywhere, it seems like, where it doesn't sink or crack or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about, if you go farther up where they've got, just different patterns. Hard to see it. It's like a breakdown of scale in certain parts.
So again, not asking you to decide anything tonight, but those are some of the ideas, you know, the idea of getting rid of that brick band.
That's a must.
Sorry?
I said that's a must.
Okay, well, and do you replace it with a full depth brick, or do you just leave it concrete? Again, that's one of the questions, you know, and there's, you know, you can do stamped concrete, you can do brushed concrete, you can, you know, again, very simple way to do it, and, you know, very inexpensive. It just, you know, pour right where the void is.
The stamped concrete is the Bowmanite stuff, and it looks just like what it is.
Okay.
Cheap imitation.
Okay.
Somebody else jump in here.
Are there any other options besides killing the trees and not doing anything? Is there anything else you can do with those tree grates? I'm assuming you've explored everything you can. Was there any other ideas of options?
And you can leave it like it is, right? You can leave it now, and you can do one-offs as like a tree dies. You can replace it with a tree grate and just do it over time, so as that you won't take out each individual, you know, you take out all the trees and do it at one fell swoop. So that is an alternative. Jeff, are there others?
We can talk with Jody from
Yeah.
Tesca if she has any other ideas, but I mean, you put the tree grate on or you don't. I don't know how to reclaim that space without a grate.
Yeah.
You know, so
Not
that's
sure
going to look
why
finished.
you need to reclaim the space. We're not putting tables out there. There's nobody there. And I don't see that happening in a long time, if ever. But that's just, you know, that's just an opinion. But there certainly is opportunity there for some further development of buildings, which we talked about, you know, years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that it would require, you know, any wider sidewalk than whatever that is now, 12, 13 feet.
Yeah.
And
No, go ahead, Jeff.
So the tree grates came about, we were talking, if we do widen the street, we would want to replant trees, we need more sidewalk, and that's where we kind of got to the point of talking about the tree grates, and that could happen with or without widening the street, but that's where it originally came from. Was,
Yeah. No, if you widen the street, that's kind of a start over, right?
Yeah. You know, does the ABR have any feelings? Because, I mean, the concept plan here did not show kind of like these bulbs or, you know, pork chops reaching out. Do you guys have a thought about that happening in front of the post office or down at this bookend? Is there a feeling about that, doing that work?
Yeah, I don't find that necessary. It's
Okay.
I don't know what that truly accomplishes. There's so much going on these sidewalks that aren't perfect. You know, I don't know if we need to add more just to add to the, I don't want to say chaos of it, but I would try to simplify things more than complicate things.
Okay, thank you for that.
I like the idea of it, but I think it, you know, to Matt's point, there's a lot going on, and it's not symmetrical, and every single corner and intersection is very different. And so, if there was a way to do it so it's simplified, but taking advantage of giving you a little bit more space, it could work. I just don't know if the plans as presented right now are the right way to go.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that a month from now, you'll have somebody who's a subject matter expert share with you some different concepts, but again, just kicking it around. To your point, you know, you guys talked about, you know, bicycle parking. Where else do we put that in the central business district? And that's another one of those things where you feel like you're shoehorning things in where you don't have enough space, and there's so much going on. To Matt's point and Julie's point, you know, the idea of at what point is it so overwhelming that it loses some aesthetic value, and maybe creates anxiety over enjoyment. So, okay. I mean, that's kind of it with terms of the concept plan. I believe at this moment, again, just reminiscing. I don't know if there's any other thoughts on this before we turn the page to the next item.
Well, just a timing thing, Drew.
Yes.
If this, something is going to start to happen this spring, am I right?
It'd be in the fall.
In the fall? Okay, so this is not a long-term project here. This is something that we've got to be thinking about pretty quickly.
I mean, in terms of this particular block that I'm showing you now, yes. All this other, no. But just this particular block, because it get resurfaced and we're replacing most of the curb. This is just one of those opportunities that, again, our engineers came up with. We could do a little tweak, tweak in quotations, and make this one way and pick up parking stalls. But again, it's not a must. It's just, this is an opportunity to talk about it.
Okay. All right. What's next on your agenda then?
All right. So the next item would be to talk about the corner, everybody's favorite corner in front of Innovasi. This group, I don't remember who was on the ABR. I know, Bob, you were there. You've always been there.
I've been there since we had dirt roads here.
Yeah, but the idea of having those, let me get rid of that.
Well, what we were originally trying to do when we were working with Land Gravel with Jim Gamble on that particular corner was so that you didn't, well, we didn't do that though. Yes, we did. So that you didn't have to go around that planter.
Yeah, right here, right?
Yeah.
The crosswalk will give you a way through there.
Gave you around through it, right.
Yeah.
And then that's the Mariani scheme that Ed and I worked with Mariani on, where you could.
Yeah, this is one of them, and that's like a stepped seating area, an active corner. And
I recollect that they gave us a price on doing, we did like 3 different schemes of that, and they gave us a price, and it was okay. That's why it's still on the drawing board. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 250 to 300,000 was the range.
And the other part of that is we have to find a place to put the dancers. And my recollection is we thought, well, back there in front of Village Hall, somewhere make a composition out of that. And now the brick pavers and the bench that the 125 bricks do, we can put them over there someplace.
Yeah, and I teed that idea up again with the garden club, and they were, I talked to the president. She's like, okay, I'm open to, talking about that again. So.
Yeah, they didn't. The last bunch, the last time around, they didn't want to do anything with it. They wanted to leave it right where it was.
Yeah. So, so this is one of the 3 corner spots. This is one of those things that Jody from Tesla is going to come in and work with you all on, but she's working on another similar type, focus point in Wilmette and their central business district. Very, similar scale and she had different ideas because I had showed her and talked about how we had sticker shock the last time we went through this. And she's like, you can do this, achieve this in a lot simpler and less expensive manner. Maybe, again, talking about what Matt really talked about with simplify, but see if that can be part of this project or not. It could be a project later down the road, but we since we're talking about it, it's part of the same geographic area, let's get some feedback about it too. So. Again, nothing has to be decided tonight, but to your point, objectives of redoing the corner absolutely would be to have the crosswalk have the ability for pedestrians to move freely, east to west without walking into a landscape bed.
Yeah. Either landscape bed or have to walk around a concrete thing.
Yeah.
An obstacle.
And we've talked to the merchants in this area, the restaurateurs and others. And again, you'll hear this from Jody in a month from now, is the idea of these. One thing we've learned from the pandemic is people want these outdoor open public spaces. it's a great place to gather. It's a great place to spend time and to enjoy your community. And we actually, there's lots of activity already on this corner, but could we do it a way differently, aesthetically, that furthers that goal? So
I think one of the things when we talked about it, whenever that was, 3 or 4 years ago, that's when the sidewalk seating was becoming almost rampant, was to set it up so that that whole thing wouldn't just be full of tables.
yeah,
And then you'd have more obstacles to get around. Right now, people are moving tables all over the place anyway, so.
yeah. Okay, and before we leave the streetscape accents and elements, this is another one I'm going to go back to the packet. The board was really keen on the twinkle lights, and that was in the agenda item.
Yeah, they're in Wauwatosa, is it?
That's correct.
They have those pictures, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, this is, the idea would be these, Jeff, why don't you walk them what these are from a structural basis?
Yeah, they are just essentially 20-foot poles with no lights on top. It's basically a loop on the top that you can hook these light strings into, and it just looks like a street light without a light on top. It just got the hook, and then you pull the lights diagonally back and forth or whatever pattern you'd like. It's just it's a light pole on a concrete base. They're not that expensive, and you'd also have your lower story street lights like you see here. So we would leave our street lights probably in place and then put these in addition.
All right. What's everybody's opinion on this?
What street are we proposing this for, or is it just a concept to be implemented someplace?
Yeah, I think the idea was, does it need to be 100% of the central business district? I think the answer to that is no, but what would be the most appropriate places to do it, to add it as a new accent, amenity is, I think the board would look for your thoughts on that, for sure.
I think it's the block we've just been talking about.
While we're ripping up the sidewalks and replacing curbs, if this was part of the plan, we would do it with that project this fall.
I don't think you'd be able to span it across the Block 1 area. But my concern is that we don't start to look a little bit too Disneyland.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to get to it. I lost it.
And they're permanent, right?
Yes.
They're not seasonal, although they could be, but.
No, I think the goal would be to put them up, and I've seen them, and again, Jody will show you more about this, and this is again introducing the concept that they have been done as, I think there's a place in Springfield that has a square that has them that you can change the colors.
No, don't do that.
I'm saying you can, right? You can make them seasonal. You can make, so you can have red and blue on white at 4th of July. You can, or you can just be white all the time. But, the where, I think the general idea, you asked the geography of it, I think some people I thought that maybe it is the hub of it, like in Wauwatosa has a major intersection that's the hub, and it kind of radiates out from that hub. Is that hub the intersection of Scranton and Center and Walnut, there, and then it radiates out, a little bit down Block 1, a little bit to the north, a little bit to the south, and a little bit to the east? Or do you do it down that main stretch in Scranton between Walnut and Oak? Where do you put it? And where does it begin and where does it end? Because you don't necessarily want to overdo it, right? So.
Yeah.
So, and to that other direction, and this has not been talked about by the board, is where is most of the activity? A lot is on the Village Green where there's no lights. So. Something that, again, to think about, and Jody will walk through that with you all. They've done it a lot. Tesca's done it in other business districts. And And so,
We're
throwing
all
that out
over
there.
Europe.
Yeah, right, yeah, so I'm certain Europe is looking at Lake Bluff right now, trying to pick up on what we're doing, so.
Yeah, we should take those damn lights down.
So, I don't know if you want an opinion now, but I'll
Please.
give it. So I feel that, you know, on the south side of Scranton, I think that kind of would accept that feel, but I think on the north side, those buildings really aren't, not to judge those buildings, but there's a disconnect between the north side and the south side of Scranton in terms of the aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you look at all those pictures, they're framed by beautiful tall buildings and wide streetscapes. I think we would be forcing that. To me, I feel like we're forcing this wonderful idea on a street that doesn't quite reach that lofty goal aesthetically. You know, they would be taller, you know, that pole may be taller than some of the buildings, and it just feels there's an inconsistency there, at least from my perspective, of introducing that on that block.
In any shape or form, Matt?
I don't know, it just feels like having those lights in front of a post office, you know, it feels wrong. You know, those lights are done to create like a sense of intimacy and, you know, like highlighting a special, right? And that side, you know, the post office isn't bad, and those other buildings, it feels like we're implementing the idea in the wrong spot.
Maybe a compromise, I thought of the same thing. Compromise would be to have these kind of go across the street and just on the north side, just end at a point, and then, you know, so it's a triangle that's the base of the triangle is on the south side of the street. So you really don't have a great deal of light on the other side. Maybe that's just a cheap way to do it, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to say it, but I agree with what Matt said. And I do think that it would be interesting to put together an exhibit of downtown Lake Bluff, and I think it'd be pretty easy to put in some little string lights in an exhibit at dusk to see how it looks in front of the post office. So just might be something to consider as someone's putting together different images for presenting during the next meeting, or, you know, for whoever else needs to review this.
Yeah, I think if we threw our corner post office building in any of these pictures, it would lose the charm of what they're trying, you know.
Well, there you go.
So I like the idea of maybe in that center area. I think I love the idea. I think they're lovely, but they need to be done correctly.
Yeah, you can't equalize both sides of the streets.
No, they're not equal streets.
Right. Then they may never be.
No.
Yeah, they don't go that far here. This is, again, the Wauwatosa. For the record, though, interesting, look at this, back-end parking only, with the bike lane.
Oh,
Yeah.
man, I wouldn't want to have a storefront there.
Yeah.
That tree's not long for this world. They've got some pretty major, well, see, that's all diagonal stuff, too. They've got some major public space there.
They do. But to your point, the idea that the scale of this architecture and stylistically, it's not a single-story post office,
No.
right? Tudor, you feel like you're in Belgium or somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
Photoshop our post office in there and they'll kill that.
Well, some of the other ones aren't charming either, so.
No, yeah, but they're.
So you think you want to see that exhibit kind of mocked up and see what it looks like, visual?
It'd be pretty easy to do. It seems like it'd be a good idea, especially, you know, to see it on both sides of the street, because the post office is gonna look strange.
Okay, I thank you for that direction. I'm taking notes, thank you.
So Drew, back when you first started, you said in some of the traffic studies that, the parking studies, that the study basically said we don't have a problem. Even though we know we have a sometime problem.
We have a problem of convenience.
Yeah. Okay.
And, you know, and for what it's worth, I mean, Mickey, who's on the call, you know, former Plan Commission Zoning Board of Appeals
Right.
individual, you know, every time you would hear any new petition that would come through for a new restaurant or something else, you know, that's what you hear about, parking, 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 even though the study says this, you know, it's one thing. The perception is, because I can't park exactly right in front of the building, then there's a problem or there's a deficiency. And, you know, the guidance we were given by Rich and Associates was, you know, you have to be very conscious that to add more restaurants, that primary, you know, business hours or in the evening, that's amplifying your issues, because that is the peak use time. You know, people come in cafe hours, there's a lot more flexibility, right? You know, coffee shops or the other cafes that coming in there, that's not a problem, because the peak uses in that same area are not the same during the day versus the evening times. So it's all driven by the tenants. And like, you know, we've all talked about on the north side of the street, it's mostly, you know, there's medical office, there's the other office users, there's interior decorators, dry cleaners, but, you know, there's not the entertainment, dining type activities that are demanding more parking, but that could change. I mean, that could change in a day, you know? I say that, you know, the truth of the matter is they would have to go through a zoning process. It's still a special use permit, but, you know, the situation that the village is in is, over the years, the village, with the redevelopment, whether it be block 1 or block 4 over time, has granted very large variations for parking. You know, the village has certain parking demand requirements as part of the zoning. At the same time, they've given away very large variations. And so here we are. All right. So that was the discussion of the Wauwatosa lighting, and that's the last streetscape modifications. So then the last two items, we don't have to spend a lot of time on, but in the packet were the 2015 Downtown Visual Preference Study, Wordles, you know, kind of those, when people were interviewed or had, came through our open houses as part of that visual preference study, that a lot of that feedback from folks, let me bring it up, was, I thought, interesting, but also at the same time not really surprising. And I guess my question to you all to think about, and the very, you know, the coming preparation of next month's meeting is, are these still relevant? They still make sense?
Some of it seems to be driven by this wants to be a food court town.
Food court town. Well, I mean, this is what
it's the best way I can think to describe it. You know, I think the notion of a little hardware store and a little this and a little that are just, that's not going to happen. You know, our boutiques have not fared well. And maybe that's the only thing that's left, which does drive the parking then at night.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the idea of brick and mortar retail is certainly through the pandemic has underscored that, you know, we're living in a Jeff Bezos world, right? And
that's right.
So what is our future? It's probably these types of service industries that support, you know, neighborhoods and the community as food and beverage destinations, and food, you know, grab and goes and other lifestyle type amenities. Yeah, I mean, some of these retailers listed here are long since gone, right?
Yeah, that's kind of my point there. I mean, yeah, more of the same. We've only got one brewery, you know.
Right, yeah. Can't support another.
Yeah.
This might be the most informing for what you guys are thinking about, right? What other amenities?
In a way, it is. You know, I think it's where the events that we have right now are big events. Some of them are every Friday. Some of them are 3 or 4 times in the course of the summer, or, you know, spring through fall. But they're big events, and most of the rest of the time, it's sort of a yawner. And I'm not sure that we should make everything set up for big events every day.
Well, I guess I would offer slightly, I guess as a footnote to what you're saying, Bob, is I think, you know, like these, you think about people gathering, alfresco dining, outdoor concerts, children playing, all that happens in the Scranton Alley on a pretty regular basis, right? You know, whether if it's a Saturday or Tuesday or whatever.
The alley is different. Yeah, that's a small big event.
A small big event, okay. But the idea is, like, you know, the village has these little, you know, special niche points or gathering places that that was something that the 98 TESCA study called out, you know, the idea of trying to create that space that maybe mimic what was happening behind Marshall Field at the time. You know, can we pull off something similar that was happening like Forest? Well, I think ours has turned the corner and then left that in the dust, right? In terms of the utility and the beauty and the atmosphere and the spirit of the community that happens in that little alley is amazing.
It is. And it's going to get more amazing if they ever build that little restaurant back there.
Agreed. But the idea that, you know, that is, you know, it has the little lights. It has, you know, an ambiance that, you know, can we do that? Can we do more of that, more of the same of that, and create other spaces like that? Because, I mean, there's nights when there's things going on in the Village Green, and there's things going on in the alley, and there's things happening on Block 1 by the brewery, and that's great. You know, there's people can choose where they want to go and spend time and making that experience, and what can we do to the streetscape to make those experiences. You know, there's times when I wish there was, like, you know, couches and a coffee table at the corner in front of the post office. That'd be great to have that outdoor furniture and do stuff that, you know, could help facilitate those types of activities and sharing and community building.
There's a street in Miami in the Arts District, and maybe anybody's been there, but it's got about a 40-foot median strip. That's one way going one way and one way the other way. And in that 40-foot median strip is outdoor restaurants, there's bars. You can sit down on couches and somebody will come from someplace and ask you what you want. It's just unbelievable. Big old trees, great old buildings. It's really, really cool. But they've got space to do it. There's just got to be 200 feet between the base of the buildings.
Yeah.
But it's also on a big scale. It's in a big city.
Yeah.
But I think the little pocket places, if you start putting them, just going to ramble a bit for a minute. Going back to the diagonal parking and going up and down Scranton Avenue for whatever reason starts to build a wall.
Yeah. Yeah, and to that, Bob, the idea is, like, you know, we're not trying to feel like when you make a right, if you're going eastbound, if you came up center and you made a right-hand turn to go eastbound on Scranton, you don't want to feel like you're driving through a parking lot, right? That's a different.
Exactly. And you know, all these events that you're talking about, 75% of the people walk there.
Or ride their bike, yeah.
Or ride their bikes. And dragging dogs and baby carriages. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So.
That's what you don't want to lose.
Agreed. And we want to, you know, and so I guess maybe the conversation is, should we be talking about eliminating the parallel parking on the north side of Scranton, making that bigger sidewalks?
Well, there's no activity over there.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, think about it. How long ago was Block 1 built? And conceptually, even the streetscape plan, considering the activity in the central business district, right? I don't know how the crystal ball was then, but it wasn't too far around the corner before that, you know, the tenant that moved in there was a brewery, you know, and then all of a sudden it flipped a switch, and the next thing we know, there's bands playing on the sidewalk.
Well, that was, don't ask permission, you know.
They asked permission. Yeah. I've taken some lumps for saying yes for things. So, yeah, the last thing I was hoping for you all to do is to, those questions that were in the packet about downtown Lake Bluff is special because blank, fill it in, the best feature of the East Scranton Avenue streetscape, you know, what are the best features, fill in the blank, and if I could change one thing about East Scranton Avenue streetscape, it would be blank. I'll email those out to you all, and you can send me back a reply, and again, that would be in preparation of the meeting next month. And I don't have to hold you all hostage here all night, although it would be fun to talk about it all night. But
Yeah, it would be funner to talk around the table, but that's not happening.
so that's all I had, Chair Hunter.
Okay, well, thank you, Drew. Taking beer now. Anybody else got anything else to comment on? Mike, you got any kind of a staff report that we haven't covered on yet?
No, I don't have anything to add tonight.
Okay. All right, then I guess we're ready to adjourn. So somebody want to make a motion, we adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Aye.
Take
Good night.
care.